This is Blake Temez with the Blake Temez podcast, where I speak as a Catholic layman to Catholic laymen about missional living, wisdom cultivation, and legacy building in service of Christ and his bride, the Church. Thanks for being here. Today, we're going to take a look at some statistics. Now, statistics are helpful for understanding the issues that the Church faces when it comes to reaching and forming and inspiring men, because they disabuse us of the illusions that we have about different phenomena, right? Because we can often measure what's happening in the Church based off anecdotal evidence or our personal experience alone, which of course is important for determining what's particular to our unique circumstances. But if we fail to understand the larger trends that are beyond our narrow view, then we miss out on some of the insights that could help us see what we can do in our circumstances and how our context, our parish, our school, whatever it might be, is being affected by these larger societal trends. So thus, statistics. Now, the statistics we'll be looking at today come from the National Congregations Study. The NCS did a survey in 1998 and then again in 2006 and 2007, looking at the gender gap in Christian churches. And this has been commented on by David Murrow, who noted the exodus of men from the church and how it accelerated in just that 9-year period. A gender gapped congregation can be defined as one that is 56% female or more. So if a congregation is 56% female or more, then we consider it being gender gapped. Now, the gender gap is present in denominations across the board. So Roman Catholic, but also Baptist, Methodist, Lutheran, everyone, evangelical, and all the rest. So it's not unique to any denomination in particular. It's, for some reason, affecting Christian churches across the board. Now, a note for those particularly interested in the Catholic Church and ministry in that context, a poll from another organization, an ABC News BeliefNet poll, found that just 26% of U.S. Catholic men attend Mass on a weekly basis, whereas 49% of Catholic women do the same. And so there's an obvious gap there when it comes to practices between the two genders. And Murrow, in his book, Why Men Hate Going to Church, notes that those statistics were taken from a poll that was done even before the worst allegations of sexual abuse by priests were revealed. And so we could imagine, perhaps not assume until we saw some other statistics, but imagine that the gap is even greater at present. Something interesting to note is how this affects African American churches in a dramatic way. Observers cited by Murrow confirmed that 75 to 90% of the adults who attend African American congregations are women. And the 1998 survey by the NCS found that 92% of African American churches in America reported a gender gap. So that's the highest of any faith group than all the rest. And so there's something interesting happening there with African American churches in particular, again, generally. One thing that we should note and that we can look at in future discussions is the impact of Islam on these African American churches, with many African American men finding something in Islam that they're not finding in Christianity. And so African American men leaving Christianity, becoming Muslim, and the Christian churches that they left remaining predominantly female. So that's just a taste of some of these differences. And the gender gap is often associated with overall decline in church health and decreasing membership over time, such that we tend to see in some of these studies and also in anecdotal evidence a decrease in the total number of members and a plateau or a more rapid decline when the gender gap is larger. To put that more simply, when there are less men in the church is less healthy. And that might be counterintuitive because of how involved women obviously are in church ministry. If we think about who are Sunday school teachers, choir members, hospitality ministers, that cook meals and deliver them even sometimes to people who are sick or grieving, we see women doing a lot of activity. And so it might be counterintuitive to see all that activity and it being carried out by women, but then see that gender gap being tied to declining church health. And this brings me to a point that I do want to emphasize, and will bring up at many points, that advocating for the advancement of masculinity within the church is not calling for a decrease in femininity, right? As calling for more men does not mean calling for less women at the same time. When we look at ratios like the gender gap, what we'd actually want to see is something closer to a parity, right? Like a 50-50 split between men and women, with the total numbers of both going up, right? We want to see growing churches with more men and more women, with the increase in membership reflecting a closer balance, right, in the sexes and the gifts that they bring and the ministry that they're drawn to and the energy that they provide in serving the church, serving the families that belong to the church, and reaching out to those who do not yet belong to the church. And so that's a bit about the gender gap, and noting that we want to balance it out. And part of what we'll be discussing throughout this podcast and through other resources that I'm putting out there is how to reach men more effectively as men in order to bring this gap more and more to a close. So that was your insight into some statistics. I encourage you to check out David Murrow's Why Men Hate Going to Church for more on that. And as always, thanks for your time and attention, and God bless you and your efforts. Peace.